God, if I could take this home, my wife would.
One item for discussion, or at least for your thought process, is we will be putting in sidewalks and everything. In lieu of putting in sidewalks in a portion of it, if I could step over here a second. We've had some internal discussions with your staff about potentially coming in over here somewhere, running through the subdivision, and then some type of trail and into the Altough subdivision over there. If that's something you want to explore, that's great. Otherwise, we're prepared to put in the sidewalks along 109th and White Oak. But if that's something that you want to do on your comprehensive plan, your trail program and things like that, that's something we'd be willing to consider on that. So just an item that's really not on there detailed, but something that you want to consider. Otherwise, the subdivision meets the requirements of the subdivision ordinance, the ordinance for the zoning on this property, and the annexation agreement for it.
Thank you, Tim. I will turn it back to the board. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Kuiper? If not, Tim, out of the 40 acres, your request, you have an R2 C PUD, if I'm
Correct.
correct. Out of the 40 acres, how much have you determined or was environmentally sensitive out of the 40 acres?
I don't know that we have an exact number on that, but it's that southwest corner. There's a wet area there.
So based on this drawing, is this the whole 40 acres and this is,
This is the whole 40 acres.
This would-
The-
none
the
of
whole
this will
idea
be
is that there's
touched?
conference- Yes,
okay,
except for potentially a trail like I discussed, if that was something we wanted to explore.
okay. And I'm sorry, my eyes are bad. I know it's not gonna be 15,000 per lot. What are we averaging? I see everything from 13,142 to 10,821?
Yeah, it has to average 11,200, but they're in excess of that for the average.
Okay.
Those are the addresses, I think, John?
Or those
Those
the
are the
address? Oh,
This, Mr. President, this one does not have to hit that 11,200 square foot average. If I could
oh,
take a
those are the
moment,
addresses? I apologize.
if I could take a moment to address what an RC2 PUD is as opposed to an R2 PUD. RC2 is a residential conservation planned unit development. This is single family, and the provision in the RC2 PUD section of the zoning ordinance provides that a developer can get no more density, no more lots out of a given parcel, this one being 40 acres, than they would in a standard 40-acre parcel that doesn't have environmentally sensitive lands. And we have an average density of 1.95 lots per acre in an R2 development. So 1.95 times the 40 acres gives them a yield of 78 lots. As an RC PUD, he's limited to, any developer is limited to that lot yield from the 40 acres. So it allows for clustering of lots in order to avoid the environmentally sensitive areas. As you know, developers can try to mitigate wetland areas and use more of the land, but as an inducement for leaving those wetlands alone, we offer an RC2 PUD as an option. So this developer has sought that zoning, and that property was annexed and zoned by last year's council as an RC2 PUD. I believe that this is more like an average of 8,100 square feet per lot, 65-foot lot widths and 140-foot lot depths on average. But again, it does not have to meet the 11.2 average. It does have to have, there's a zoning commitment that goes along with this property. They have to have at least 6-foot side yard setbacks on the interior, and typical side yard interior setbacks are 10 foot for 8 feet for an R2 subdivision. There's another condition of the zoning commitment, the RC2 PUD zoning commitment that they have to meet, but they do have the zoning commitment terms that they have to meet, and they are meeting those with this proposal.
Thank you,
Oh,
Rick.
I'm sorry, I know what it was, the minimum house sizes. They are 1,700 square foot minimum for a ranch, 2,250 square feet for a story and a half, and a 2,250 square feet for 2-story or greater. Our typical standards are 1,900 square feet for a ranch, 2,250 for a story and a half, and 2,400 for a 2-story.
All right. Any questions for Tim from the commission? Concerns? Comments?
You can have that, because I got all the stuff too.
All right. With that, we'll move on to number B.
Yeah, and
Twen-
just if I could, Mr. Chairman, we would be at the February 5th meeting, the public meeting, and we would be requesting to advertise at that time, unless there's any other big issues that are outstanding.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that's what the expectation is.
Thank you.
So yeah, just for the general public's knowledge, we'll do public notice to public hearing, which will then be in March. There will be one more study session in February, and then they will come before the commission for some sort of decision regarding the plat. All right, Tim, we'll go on to point B, the Gates of St. John East. Petition plans to introduce an R2 PUD single-family development plan for Unit 24 and part of Unit 25. This is over on Klein and 231.
And just for everyone's orientation, the next 3 items are all part of what has been kind of named the East Gates. So it's east of Klein, in between 231 and 109th. Previously, last year on December 5th, a primary plat was approved for the main middle section of this project. What's before you right now is the southern part of that project that ties into the previously approved plat. This again is consistent with the annexation ordinance that was put in place, the zoning ordinance that accompanied that, as well as your current subdivision requirements. It is 38.557 acres.
And I certainly can answer, again, any questions that you may have on it, but again, it's the southern part of was approved last December.
Bringing it back to the commission, any
So
questions?
so this zoning's already been approved?
This is,
Yeah.
yes, this was annexed and zoned by last year's town council, and carries an R2 PUD zoning currently.
Is this in our packet? I don't see it.
This,
It's just.
that particular drawing, Mr. Burleson, is not, what you have,
Oh, okay.
what you have is this drawing, and that shows how each of the pods lays out. So
Okay.
it's- That's the one you wanna take a look at there.
Tim, what is the big lot in the southwest corner of the subdivision to be used for?
That's currently where there are buildings existing and things like that, so they wanted to preserve that.
Is there a bank there currently, or?
No,
I think that's the barn.
No, this is north of 231, I don't even know how many feet, but there's a red barn and some other things that are
Okay.
housed.
Oh, quite a bit farther
Yeah,
north, okay.
yeah.
Yep.
It's just across from where that orchard ties out.
Okay.
I think that's at like horse arena place.
Oh, okay.
Tim, is there any connectivity to the south? Because that's, I know it's not part of this plan unit development, but were we pushing everybody out to Klein Avenue or heading up
Correct.
north?
Correct. And it had
So-
been requested previously to not do anything to the south for Mr. Barman and things like that. So that's why there's none provided that way.
And this layout, there was a traffic analysis done by First Group Engineering. So that will take into consideration all the improvements
So
for,
this, plus, if you have the larger one in front of you, I think you all have that right now, that traffic study took into account that entire project if it was completely built out.
okay.
So the connection on 101st plus the connection on Klein, the traffic improvements that would be required for both of those intersections.
the property that Mr. Kraus asked about is this property where I'm highlighting with the cursor, be in this corner, and the buildings that Mr. Kuiper referred to are right here.
Rick, there was another parcel that we did where the petitioner that came in did not own the property to the north, but we sort of recommended some connectivity. I can't remember what development that was, where it would be good for future development.
It was on.
Well, you did that in
Calumet Avenue.
Kilkenny. Yeah,
Was it
you-
on Calumet, east of Calumet Avenue?
And I understand you do not own property to the south of this, but, I mean, we did that for, I can't remember who that was.
Well, we've done it for a couple. We did it in Mill Creek for property south of that. We did it in Kilkenny for property to connect to Columbia in the unincorporated area, but those folks in the unincorporated area remonstrated against that, so we did not allow for that connection. But we did, you may be thinking about what Mr. Burleson just said, and that was the proposal that was going to include a Dunkin' Donuts over on Calumet Avenue, just south of 101st.
On the east side.
On the
of
east side.
Calumet Avenue.
We were going to have them provide a stub into the property north of them. It was a 20-acre parcel north of them.
I
But
thought this was off of
typically-
Klein, and it was a residential development where they were gonna put a lot, and they put an easement for a future road connection to the north. I'll remember it after I leave this meeting.
Mr. President, that's Walden Clearing.
Walden Clearing.
Walden, yeah.
Okay.
So they didn't own the property to the north, and we were concerned about any future development in that area. But we sort of asked, this is a lot of units being forced, I shouldn't say forced, being directed outside to Klein. And unit 24 and 25 are the farther south side. I'm just for traffic flow and access points. We might want to consider something to the south. Whether it happens or, that's a problem. We don't know if it's going to happen or not.
All these units are the 111 acres? Is that what this area is?
No, this is
It's
108.
It is part of the 111, that's
Part of the
correct.
111, okay.
Yes. The 108 was what we did in December, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for the board? Concerns, comments?
I personally am concerned with the lack of green space. It's just unit upon unit, all stacked together. It doesn't look appealing at all. If being a resident, what would draw you to that community?
Very good. With that, we will move on to point C, 2020-2005. This is petition plans introduced, development plan for unit 27 and 28, which is on the northern end of the development. I'm looking at that right.
Correct.
And this one does have an access point out to 101st.
Correct.
Questions or comments for the board to Mr. Kuiper?
And this also provides the northern leg for the bike path along the NIPSCO easement on those rear yards, where the red is highlighted on the screen right now. The previous primary plat had a portion of the bike trail that would connect over into the gates of St. John. It went across in a easterly fashion over towards the NIPSCO easement, and then we'll run up towards what's going to be someday the shareable bike path, and then ultimately connect up there. Otherwise, again, this complies with the annexation ordinance, the zoning commitments, the subdivision requirements that are in place for this property.
No issues with the cul-de-sac lengths on these? Nothing for the plan commission to
Right.
review?
Right.
Okay.
Because it's PUD, John.
Okay, that's right.
And as we previously discussed last year, Mr. Chairman, because I think you're the only one, Mr. Panzik, Kraus, and Everly, but that on the east side there, there's that cul-de-sac there, but as you recall, that road going across was much higher. We did bring that down to shorten the length of that overall roadway on both of those.
All right, if there's no further comments, questions, oh, I'm sorry, oh, absolutely.
You know what, Margaret, can you guys hear me? I think I was using this microphone incorrectly. Is that better? Yeah, okay, awesome. Rick, for the benefit of those that were not here or were not part of the planning commission last year, can you just give me an idea in terms of, as it pertains to this project, where are they at? I think somebody said that they're seeking primary plat approval in March, or can you just
Right.
give me, okay,
The public hearing that they are requesting is for a primary plat approval of these units, of
Okay.
24 and part of 25, of 27 and 28. And then your next item on the agenda is a replatting of pod 22, lots 2249 through 2258. So that's the next step for them, is to seek a public hearing on the platting
Okay.
of this property.
And then Ken and Rick will review it to make sure it meets the PUD and the zoning requirements.
The zoning commitment, yes, the terms of the
'Cause this
zoning
is-
commitment.
They have to meet an average of 11.2 over the course of the development, or the PUD. All right, point D, petitioner plans to introduce a replat of R2 PUD for plot plan unit 22, lots 2249 and 2258.
So it's not technically a replat, but it's an amendment to the primary plat that was approved in December. This just redoes some of the lots based upon the overall project. It also redoes the lot lines inside of the drainage area. Otherwise, it meets all of the other requirements, but that's what it is.
You didn't like those layouts before?
I thought they were awesome. I figured I could set up a rifle range or something, nice and long.
All right, prior, there was, just for the new board members, there was some, again, he has to meet 11, part of the PUD is 11,200 square foot lots. And there was some sort of discussion on if this first phase of unit 22 was under 11,200 square feet, what happens, you know, if the rest of the development doesn't work? So, there were commissioners, board members that wanted him to meet that 11.2. So some of his lots, he made, I think, 80 feet by 900.
60
They were
feet
long.
by 900.
Feet wide to meet that 11.2. So now he's coming in, keeping the same width, but reducing the depth. Because now he has these other units to try to meet the 11,200 square foot average per lot. Did I say that correctly? Sometimes I stick my foot.
I think you
in my mouth.
got it.
Right, you
Okay.
got the gist of it, yes.
So they're coming in now for a amendment to the initial plat that was approved in December, correct? Yeah,
Correct.
December.
Well, along with the amendment, the, technically, the engineering in that area hasn't been approved for those lots. Because you have the U-shape,
Correct.
yeah, none of that has been looked at, but, I mean, the first go-round, it was on the plans, but it needs to be resubmitted with this plat.
I believe it was resubmitted, the engineering for this.
Well, the only thing that I got is the plat.
I'll confirm with the engineer, but I thought that was submitted along with this,
Yeah.
but I'll get it.
I talked to Don on the phone about it, so.
Okay.
He knows about it.
Mr. President, so the developer's trying to meet 11,200 for each lot?
For the
No, no, no,
entire
it's
development.
For the
For-
entire development. At that time, he was only coming in for unit 22, and so there was some discussion on how he needs to meet the 11.2. So now he's coming in, the average is 11.2 over the course of the development.
Well, with the first submittal, it had to do with it dealt with the 108 acres that is already in town.
Okay,
And over that 108 acres, their plat did not meet the 11,200 square foot average. It did not have to meet that, just being part of the 108 acres. But as Mr. Kennedy explained, there was some concern on the part of the previous plan commission that what if we never got to the other 111 acres?
Okay.
We'd never get to the 11.2 average. So Mr. Lawton revised the plat and had these larger lots that brought the average up
average
to 11.2.
for this
that
unit,
For that 108 acres.
for that, okay.
Now that the whole thing's coming in together, he can revise these lots, and we'll see, as Mr. Kennedy mentioned, Ken and I both will look at this and measure all the lots and make sure that they meet the 11.2 on average with this new totality. But the original 108 acres didn't meet it. It was more like 9,300 square foot average for the lots. And there was just that concern that, what if the economy tanks and it never goes further than this, so.
Where does the corner lot that Bob brought up, 2461, is that included in the average?
It is, yeah.
So even though, would that be developed into something potentially? Or is that?
No, it would
a-
just be a separate subdivided lot of record instead of a meets and bounds description.
Right, it's a platted lot as it's presented. There's also a large lot on the northeast corner of the annexed area that is roughly 7.5 acres, and that counts towards the average as well.
A subdivided lot.
Yes, it is a lot in this, a proposed lot in this 220 acre development.
Yeah, with the big easement running through it.
Plan for that, or?
A home,
I'm sure it would only be allowed to have one home built on
Right.
it.
it's a single home on
Yeah.
that large lot.
How many lots are included in this entire plan?
It's gonna be 600 plus or minus a few, Donna. That total count I've not gotten to yet, but in the original version, I believe it was like 606, something like that, yeah. But I'll have that number for you.
I think we're at 615 right
615, okay.
Comments? Questions? All right, we will move on. Then number E, revised letter of credit for pods 7E, 7F, 9B, 17B, and the gates of St. John. Mr. Lawton, seeking, contrary to petitioner, has installed additional improvement in these pods. Consequently, he is asking for a reduction in the required letters of credit.
Tim Kuiper here on behalf of BLB St. John LLC on this one. We've just asked for some review of those pods and the letter of credit amounts that are required. We understand that some of those inspections have been made, and so whatever Ken comes up with is, the number.
Ken, you'll make a recommendation to the board.
Right, I've already requested Public Works to check into it. They've checked into some of them. We're looking at, there's others where I don't think a bond or a letter of credit was submitted. They were just gonna wait until, to sign the Mylars until the improvements were in. Was that,
That was all but 7E. 7E, as far, I believe, is the only one that we were getting a letter of credit or bond for. The other three, we were gonna withhold signatures from the plat until those improvements were in, as opposed to getting a letter of credit or bond. According to Plan Commission minutes, that's the status.
And because there's new plan commission members, typically you require a letter of credit at the time that the Mylar is signed for the preliminary plat to guarantee that the improvements will be put into the project. In this case, the developer has found it easier to put in the improvements, withhold the Mylars, have everything improved and inspected, and then have it signed and recorded. It just eliminates the need for that in-between and posting it and unposting it the way that these things are being developed.
And for our benefit, we have Ken give us a letter of recommendation, so. we'll be making improvements.
and actually, the preferred way to do it is to put the improvements in and then sign the Mylars.
Public Works doing due diligence to make sure all the improvements are in and
Right. They
and
keep
access
records.
to manholes and valves and,
Yeah, they keep records of all the testing of the water mains, not just the bacteria test, but
right,
pressure tests.
yes.
Same with the sewers. They have several tests for them to go through. The sub-base of the road, the base of the road, all has to be proof-rolled, and they keep records of all those tests.
Yeah, do they check all the manholes, make sure they have access to them and valves and B-boxes?
Correct, yeah.
Any more questions from the board? Ken, it was nice seeing you again.
That's it for me for tonight. Thank you. Have a great evening. We'll see you in
February.
February.
Next item on the agenda, 2020-007, John Tisha. I apologize. The petitioner owns two by-side lots in Lake Hill Development, and he would like to combine into one lot subdivision so he can build one home on a combined property. Just for the town, we do not allow a house to straddle property lines, so he's just merging two lots into one. John, I will turn it over to you.
Hello, my name is John Sakas.
Sorry
I-
about that.
It's okay. So I initially purchased lot 5, and we realized that it's narrow. I know it's bigger than what's been shown previously, but we're trying, the covenants in Lake Hills requires a side loading garage, and we realized real quickly that it's not as wide, and we needed more space, and we were lucky that lot 6 went up for sale, and we're lucky enough to buy both lots, and we want to combine them to build one home, and not to make a big home, just we want more green space. We want a big yard for my family.
And the hardship that he would be facing is, even if he bought both lots and built on, say, lot 5 and did not build on lot 6, he wouldn't be able to use lot 6 for sheds or pools, accessory structures, because we don't allow an accessory structure on a lot that does not have a primary structure on it. And as Mr. Kennedy said, we don't allow a house to straddle the common property line If we did, then he would not need to replat this, because in that case, he would have a primary structure on both lots, and then could have a fence, a deck, a shed, a pool on either lot. But we simply don't, so it necessitates him replatting this as a one-lot subdivision as opposed to the two lots that are there now. No other physical changes.
Any driveway issues, would we request, I know that's not maybe for this discussion, but maybe pushing it to lot 5 versus,
Well, John's gonna have to decide which street he's going to access, if it's gonna be Lakeside Court or Winding Trail. Not that, he could have a driveway go out to both, as far as that's concerned, but, he's going to orient his house likely on Lakeside Court and preserve that address, the 10351 address, John?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're thinking about angling it almost at a corner. And right now, we're thinking the driveway would be on Lakeside Court in that area.
Yeah, the reason, we like to have the house facing the street that it's addressed on. Mike can address that, and John too, from the fire department's perspective, when they're looking for a house on Lakeside Court, if he had a Winding Trail address, you'd be looking for,
It'd be 4 digits instead of 5 in this
Right.
instance.
so it can be confusing to our emergency first responders, our emergency services. So we like having those houses face in the street that they're addressed on.
and this is action we could take on February.
But he'll have to do the same thing, he'll have to seek permission to advertise, and the public hearing would be in March.
Okay.
And keep in mind, especially for the new members of the Plan Commission, when there's something this simple, where it's a one-lot subdivision, you can grant primary and secondary plat approval in the same meeting, as opposed to, you wouldn't do that with a larger development like you saw earlier that's got 20, 30 lots in it. But a simple one-lot subdivision, you can take that action and grant both of those approvals in the same meeting. Now, you do have to wait 30 days by law between the time you approve the primary and the time you sign the secondary. But it means that he would not have to come back to 2 more meetings if you would take the action of approving it as primary and secondary plat approval in the same meeting. And that's the way it'll be shown on the agenda. That just saves some time on the petitioner's part.
And even though it's coming in for primary plat approval, it'll be reviewed as a secondary plat.
Yes.
On this case, because it's already in an existing subdivision that's had all of its engineering reviewing done.
Correct.
So because of that, we won't have to review for engineering. If this happened to be somewhere like on Calumet Avenue where it's not in a subdivision, it would have to be reviewed for sewer, water, roads, all that kind of stuff. But this one's different.
Yep. Slam dunk.
Any questions for the board? John, thank you very much. We'll see you in February.
Okay, thank you.
Finally, on the agenda, item number G, discuss plans to update comp plan, zoning ordinance, and subdivision control.
We're gonna tackle this one bite at a time. It's gonna take some time. It may take most of the year to do this, because I don't want to overload you at every meeting, but what I plan to do is bring probably the zoning ordinance to you in a few sections at a time with recommended changes, and I'll give you my explanations for why. There's just a series of conflicts in the zoning ordinance particularly. I know Ken has some thoughts about changes that he'd like to see made in the subdivision control ordinance, and so do I. I think the subdivision control ordinance is actually a little easier, so I may just start with that rather than cutting our teeth on the zoning ordinance. They're both large documents, but I don't believe there's as many changes that Ken and I are wanting to propose to the subdivision ordinance as opposed to the zoning ordinance, so. But again, we'll just break it down, give you a few sections of the ordinance at a time, and we'll discuss it at study sessions. till we get to the point where we're ready to put together an ordinance that Adam will draft for us, put it into the proper legal form, and then we'll conduct a public hearing on those changes and make a recommendation to the town council and ask them to adopt whatever it is that we come up with as a group. The comprehensive plan, I think, and I'm sorry, Paul, you and I didn't talk about this immediately before this meeting, but I know you had expressed to me at one point that you wanted to at least take another look at the comprehensive plan. Now, it was last updated 3 years ago. Typically, you review and amend a comp plan every 5 years, sometimes as many as every 10 years if you're not a growing community, and of course, that's not us, we are a growing community. But I think, Paul, did you have anything comments you wanted to make about the comp plan?
Well, yes, actually, so you mentioned the comp plan, the zoning ordinance, and the subdivision control ordinance. So, actually, I don't feel the comp plan needs to be looked at quite yet. It's pretty fresh still. And what we're looking at in both subdivision control and zoning are not changes brought forth by a master or comprehensive plan change, which would usually influence your zoning and subdivision control ordinance. The changes we're proposing are revisions to fix confusion, conflict, also to make the subdivision control more concrete standards and give developers something a little easier to bite into as far as is what they're doing. So I agree with what you just mentioned a minute ago, is do the subdivision control ordinance first, because I think that's pretty cut and dry, and then touch the zoning ordinance after that.
Yeah.
And when you're I'll let you finish now, because then I'm going to actually bring up a few things regarding subdivision control ordinance, some specifics, okay?
Okay, that's really all I had. I just wanted to let you know that we're going to we'll start doing this with next month's study session. And Ken and I will make some time to get together and talk about the changes in the subdivision control ordinance. That's this monster. And then, once we finish that, we'll tackle the zoning ordinance. But I agree with Paul, there just aren't as many changes necessary to the subdivision control ordinance, although it's been, there's been a longer period of time since it was overhauled than the zoning ordinance, but there just hasn't been the need for the changes to it that there are in the zoning ordinance, in my opinion, so.
So you don't want to overwhelm us. Why don't we wait till April or May?
Do it now. Rick's been chomping at the bit to do this stuff.
3 years.
3 years.
Well,
years.
I'm not funny, I'm trying to be funny, but, thank you, Rick. Before we bring it to the board, Councilman Panzik, do you have anything to?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually going to just briefly touch on some of these things, and this will actually help all of you to understand some of what we're going to do, especially the new members. So, for the benefit of the new members and the public, the subdivision control ordinance is a document that if you're going to build a subdivision, it tells you that you need to put sidewalks in. It tells you your streets have to be so wide. It tells you what the certain parameters are when you're building a subdivision. So I think there's a few things that need work. I'm going to bring up a couple examples, and I've already discussed some of these with Rick and Adam and even Ken. So one of the examples I'm going to bring up was on one of the plats tonight. We had, in an effort to achieve a lot size average in that PUD, many of the lots encompassed a great deal of detention area. So St. John subdivision control ordinance, you can have, your whole lot could be underwater. It's okay as long as you have enough room for your building and all the setbacks. I think that's inappropriate. Developers use that as an advantage to increase density, and it's really a falsehood. So Rick had mentioned that in his experience, he's aware of ordinance that would exclude a detention area. So when you have a lot, it has to be outside of a detention area. So that's one revision that I would recommend we look into. It's cut and dry. It would give, again, a concrete standard for a developer to say, well, okay, I can't do that anymore. I need to keep my lot out of the water, because it's kind of a cheat. And especially in the case of this PUD, there's ridiculously large lots that are halfway in a detention area. The second revision, and some folks in this room, this is near and dear to them, would be regarding pipeline encroachment onto lots, pipeline and pipeline easement. And Adam, our attorney, has looked into this with some documents I gave him, and he did more exploration, and we're looking at a potential to, as a starting point, to take a residential lot, and if it's already a minimum size lot, that we would exclude any easements to encroach on it. Maybe if you had a larger lot, you could have an easement encroachment. So that's one approach. Another approach would be to have a minimum setback for the easement from the building structure. So the whole idea is for safety, to give a concrete standard to increase safety of structures. Because right now, the Vector pipeline, which is over 1.6 billion cubic feet of gas at, like, I forget how many hundreds of pounds of square foot pressure, it is 15 feet away from some people's homes, and that's not okay. So, yes, it's happened in town. Yes, we have lots platted that way. I'm not comfortable with that. So going forward, we'd like to address that and at least have some kind of a minimal buffer space. It doesn't have to be 300 feet. I mean, even if we were to, like our rear yard setback's 40, maybe we need to make a surrounding setback of 40 around a structure. So Adam and Rick are working on, we've had some dialogue with that, so that'll be a discussion point for us, okay? A third thing that I'm going to hit on with subdivision control is sidewalks. And we've gotten better at requiring sidewalks. But one of the statements in the subdivision control ordinance calls for the plan commission, at its discretion, can request a wider sidewalk in certain areas. Specifically, you'd probably do that along an artery. And that comes into play when a subdivision is going against Klein or something like that. You know, maybe that sidewalk needs to be 10 foot wide. That's what our subdivision control ordinance calls for. But I'd like to see that be a concrete standard so that if a builder builds and it's on one of our main arteries and they're defined in our thoroughfare plan, they would just know, okay, well, I'm building along Joliet and I'm going to put in bike path width for a sidewalk. Because essentially that would be, add to our trail system. And it is in our subdivision control ordinance, but it's wishy-washy and people forget about it. So that could be a concrete standard we could add. And I know Ken had some recommendations on revisions too. So those, just touching on a few of and those are more mechanical things as far as how to build out a subdivision. And then when we do the zoning ordinance, then you're getting more into the, some more nuances. Well, that'll be another day's work. But yeah, I think the subdivision control ordinance is a good place to start and pretty simple to digest. When we take them one item at a time, we could be through it in probably a month or two,
And I understand what you mean by concrete standard for the wider sidewalks, but let's make them asphalt, because you don't want to be riding a bike on concrete stamped, so you want asphalt, so.
And that's something we could discuss, and again, the developers encourage us to have concrete standards. State statute calls for it. And so we'll make sure that whole subdivision control ordinance is up to snuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Bring it back to the board before we adjourn. Any comments, concerns by the board? I know some of you are new, some of you have come back. We've been put into the fire. So I appreciate your patience, understanding, and getting involved and getting your hands around the subject in front of us. And to the public that came out tonight, thank you very much. We appreciate the time you spent with us. We appreciate your feedback, and we look forward to seeing you again throughout the year. So with that,
Mr. President, I have one statement or one comment on, like on the studies, the special meeting. I'd like to see public comment put in front of the public hearing before we even discuss it. Let the public come to us first before we vote on it. I think that'd be a good idea. We can kick that around amongst ourselves. And
Well, public hearing, you would have the comments before, are you talking about a public hearing? Because they would present first.
well, like this one, the study.
Well, the study session right now, it has been brought up about having public comment at a study session. In the past, we've never had it.
No,
Bob's
I'm talking
talking
about
about
the special
Yeah,
meeting.
So if we were gonna vote, we would open the floor up.
We'd ha-
And
We
then
would
we
have,
would vote.
we would
it.
have a
Okay.
public hearing first.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Since it was asked for continuance, we
And that
did not
public
open it up
comment's
to
just
public
like
hearing.
anything you could talk.
okay, okay, yep. That's all I got.
All right, with that, I'm just gonna call for adjournment.